Hey there, this is Angela. Welcome to the Study for the Bar in Your Car podcast. This is Season 2, Contract Law, and this is going to be Episode 4, where we talk about contract modification. Now, I feel on every bar exam that I've taken, there has been a contracts question on modification. Either it's on modification or it's on contract formation or something like that. So this is a topic that's really important to nail down, and I feel like it's the one part of contract law that I still sort of struggle with. I don't know. I like contract law now. I didn't used to like it. I used to find it incredibly hard, really difficult conceptually. But I like how, I want to say how plain and simple it is, but it has real definite rules. And it's really different than other areas of the law. So I've grown to really sort of like and appreciate it. I'm not at the point where I love it yet, but I'm all right with contract law. Now, conflicts of law, I still have some issues with. And maybe there are a couple of other topics in law that I'm like, still struggling with. So for this podcast, as you may know, how it works is that I take my notes, I put them into AI. AI generates a podcast. So you'll be listening to a podcast within a podcast. I've named the hosts Maud and Claude, and they just take my notes and they have a conversation about it. So a few things, I'm not an attorney. I'm not barred by any state, but I am barred by 2 Native American tribes in their tribal courts. That's another story, and I'll get into that at some other point. AI isn't always correct. So sometimes I'll find something that's not correct and I have to go back and regenerate the whole podcast. So I correct things as far as I understand them to be incorrect. But then again, I'm still a law student. So, let me clarify. I'm an LLM law student. So I got my law degree in the UK, then I came over to the US and I got my law degree again. And then I got another LLM. But that's another story as well. Anyhow, so we're going to delve into contract modification. And whenever you get a fact pattern on this, it's always so typical. Like someone started something, then they changed their mind, and then they throw in the mailbox rule, and it just gets so difficult. I know the mailbox rule is more about formation, but for the bar exam, they just throw a lot at you. It's not like they just say, okay, we're only going to test on this concept. They'll throw 3 or 4 concepts at you. Whether it's within contract law, they'll throw in some other areas of law as well. So without further ado, here are our AI hosts, Claude and Maud. Take it away, guys.
Angela from Study for the Bar in Your Car podcast. Welcome. We're doing this deep dive just for you today.
That's right. We're digging into contract modifications.
Using your own law school notes and outlines as our guide here.
Yep. The goal is to really unpack those key rule statements, UCC, common law.
Exactly. The must-knows without getting totally swamped in the details. We want this clear for your bar prep.
So let's dive in. We're looking at how contracts change after they're made.
Okay, let's maybe start with the UCC, Article 2.
Good place to start. Angela's notes will remind you, this is for contracts selling goods.
Right. Goods, things you can move when the contract identifies them, like maybe the car you're studying in right now.
Exactly. But remember, if the UCC is silent on something.
Common law often steps in. That's a key point from the notes.
Absolutely. And what about those mixed contracts? Goods and services.
Yeah. Angela's outline covers that. You look at the dominant part of the deal, right?
Usually, yes. The dominant purpose test. Unless the payment is clearly split between the goods and the services. Right. If it's divided, then Article 2 just applies to the goods part, the appliance, say.
Okay, got it. So first step is always figuring out if the UCC even applies.
Crucial first step.
So assuming it does apply, how do modifications work? This is where it gets interesting, I think.
It really does. UCC Section 2209. This is a big one for you to flag, Angela.
Okay, 2209.
An agreement modifying a sale of goods contract needs. Well, it needs no new consideration to be binding.
No consideration needed. That's huge compared to common law.
A massive difference. We'll get to common law in a bit, but yeah, remember that for UCC.
But hang on, what if the original contract says modifications have to be in writing?
Good point. The No Oral Modification, or NOM clause. Your notes probably mention this.
Yeah, I think so.
If that clause is in the original signed agreement, then yeah, an attempted oral modification usually isn't effective.
Usually. So there are exceptions.
Well, it can be waived. Parties' actions, their conduct, might show they intended to waive that writing requirement.
Okay, so even with the NM clause, conduct can sometimes override it. That feels like a potential exam trap.
It definitely can be tricky. Courts look at reliance, waiver by conduct. It underlines why documenting changes is still best practice.
Makes sense. Keep it clear. Okay, so UCC mods. No consideration needed unless the contract says otherwise in writing. And even that can sometimes be waived.
You got it. Now, what about just calling the whole thing off? Recision. Angela's notes cover this too.
Right, recision. Both sides just agree to cancel the original deal.
Exactly. Mutual agreement and that agreement to cancel. It's actually a new binding contract itself.
A new contract to end the old one. What's the consideration there?
Each side gives up their right to make the other side perform the original duties. That's the exchange.
Okay, but there's a condition, isn't there? Something about timing.
Yes. Crucial point from your notes. For mutual rescission to work, the original contract duties must still be executory on both sides.
Executory, meaning neither side has fully performed yet?
Precisely. If one side has fully performed, you can't just mutually rescind without new consideration usually. It needs that mutual giving up of existing rights.
Got it. Both sides need something left to do. Okay, what about waiver then? Not canceling, just letting something slide.
Yeah, waivers. A party can choose not to enforce a term or condition, like a delivery date.
And under the UCC, does that need consideration?
Nope. Just like modifications, no new consideration is needed for a valid waiver under the UCC.
So, if a buyer keeps accepting late deliveries without complaining?
That could definitely be seen as waiver of the original delivery date. Waiver by conduct.
But can they change their mind later, like suddenly demand on-time delivery after accepting late ones for months?
They can try to retract the waiver, but there are limits. Your outline should touch on this.
Okay.
A party can retract a waiver for future executory parts of the contract. They have to give reasonable notice.
Reasonable notice that they're going back to strict performance.
Exactly. But, and this is a big but, they can't retract if the other party has materially relied on that waiver.
Detrimental reliance. So if retracting would be unjust because the other side relied on the waiver,
then the retraction isn't allowed. It ties back to that fundamental UCC principle, good faith and fair dealing.
which your notes say you cannot waive.
Absolutely non-waivable.
Yeah.
Honesty, in fact, reasonable commercial standards. It underpins everything in the UCC, including modifications and waivers.
Okay, UCC covered. Flexible on consideration for mods and waivers, but watch out for NO clauses, ensure rescission is mutual and executory, and remember good faith.
That's a solid summary. Ready to switch to common law.
Let's do it. Common law modifications. Angela's notes seem pretty clear here. Generally, you need new consideration.
That's the baseline rule. Unlike the UCC, common law holds onto that consideration requirement much more firmly.
And this brings us to that classic rule, the pre-existing legal duty rule.
Ugh, yes. The bane of many a 1L contract student.
So remind us, what's the core idea?
Basically, promising to do something you're already legally obligated to do under the same contract is not valid consideration for modification.
You can't offer the same performance twice, essentially.
Exactly. You're not giving anything new in exchange for the other side's modified promise.
But like most common law rules, there are exceptions, right? Angela's outline lists quite a few.
Oh, absolutely. The courts have carved out ways around it because, frankly, applied rigidly, it can be unfair or impractical.
So what's the first big exception?
New or different consideration. If you promise to do something additional or different than your original duty.
Like finishing the job faster or adding an extra feature.
Precisely. Even a slight change or addition can often be enough. As your notes might hint, courts sometimes seem keen to find that slight difference to enforce the modification.
Okay, so any genuine change in duty works. What else?
How about voidable obligations? Think contracts with minors.
Okay.
If a minor enters a contract, it's voidable. But if they reach the age of majority and then promise to perform, they ratify the contract. That promise is binding without new consideration.
Right. They're affirming the original, albeit voidable deal. Makes sense.
Then there's the pre-existing duty owed to a third party.
That sounds a bit more complex.
It is, but the idea is, if you're already obligated to Party A, promising Party B you'll perform that same duty for Party A can be consideration for Party B's promise to you.
Because Party B gets the benefit or assurance of that performance.
That's the rationale. essentially. They're bargaining for your performance of that duty. It's a bit niche, but it's an exception.
Okay. What about disputes? If the parties disagree about the original contract?
Another key exception. An honest dispute over the duty. If there's a genuine, good faith disagreement about what the original contract required.
Then agreeing to a modification to settle that dispute is enforceable.
Yes. The consideration is seen as each party giving up their claim or defense in the dispute. It's like a mini settlement agreement.
That feels a lot like accord and satisfaction, which I think is also in Angela's notes.
Very similar concept, yes. We'll touch on that again. The key is a genuine dispute.
Right. Can't just invent a dispute to get around the rule. And the last big one from the outline. Unforeseen circumstances.
Yes, some places recognize this. If truly unforeseen difficulties arise after the contract is formed, making performance much more burdensome than anticipated.
Like a natural disaster making materials impossible to get, not just like prices went up a bit.
Exactly. It has to be something significant and unanticipated that fundamentally alters the nature of the performance. If that happens, a modification to adjust for it might be upheld without new consideration, but it's a narrow exception.
So common law needs consideration. Beware the pre-existing duty rule, but know the escape hatches, new different duty, voidable obligations, duty to third party, honest dispute, and sometimes unforeseen circumstances.
You've nailed the key points there.
All right. Now, Angela's outline finishes with some fundamental contract law rules. These seem relevant beyond just modifications.
Absolutely. These are bedrock principles you need for the bar exam, Angela. Let's quickly run through them.
First up, mutual assent.
Offer and acceptance. The meeting of the minds. No contract without it.
Simple enough. Second, consideration itself.
The bargain for exchange of legal value. Benefit to the promiser or detriment to the promisee. We've seen how crucial this is, especially its different treatment under UCC and common law for mods.
Definitely. Third, good faith and fair dealing.
We touched on this. Implied in every contract, UCC and common law. Honesty, fairness in performance and enforcement. UCC has that specific definition.
Honesty, in fact, and the observance of reasonable commercial standards of fair dealing.
That's the one. You can't act in bad faith to, say, force a modification.
Important check on power imbalances. Okay, next. Parole evidence rule.
Ah, the PER. If you have a written contract intended as the final, complete agreement, a full integration.
Then you generally can't bring in evidence of prior or contemporaneous agreements to contradict the writing.
Correct. Protects the finality of the written word. But as Angela's notes truly point out, it's not absolute.
Right. Exceptions.
You can usually use extrinsic evidence to explain ambiguities, or to supplement a partially integrated agreement with consistent additional terms.
Then things like course of dealing, course of performance, trade usage.
Those can almost always come in to explain or supplement, even for a fully integrated agreement, under the UCC especially. PER doesn't typically bar those.
Okay, so PER blocks contradictions, but context and explanations are often allowed. What about when there's no consideration, but someone relies on a promise?
That's promissory estoppel, or detrimental reliance.
The idea that a promise can be enforced anyway.
If the promisor should reasonably expect the promise to rely, the promisee does rely to their detriment, and injustice can only be avoided by enforcement. Yes.
But the remedy might be limited.
Often limited to reliance damages, just enough to compensate for the harm caused by the reliance, not necessarily the full expectation damages of a contract.
Got it. A fallback when consideration fails, but fairness demands a remedy. What about accord and satisfaction? We mentioned it earlier.
Right. It's a way to discharge an existing duty.
Yeah.
The accord is the new agreement to accept a different performance.
Usually less money on a debt.
Often, yes. And the satisfaction is the actual rendering of that different performance.
And there's that rule about checks, right? Payment in full?
Yes. Under UCC 33311, for disputed or unliquidated debts, if a debtor sends a check conspicuously marked payment in full, or similar language, and the creditor cashes it.
That can operate as an accord and satisfaction, settling the bet for that lesser amount.
It often can, yes. There are specific rules and exceptions, but that's the core idea for disputed debts.
Okay, a specific mechanism for settling debt disputes. And finally, Angela's notes loop back to waiver and estoppel.
We saw waiver earlier, intentionally giving up a right or condition.
And estoppel.
If someone waives a condition and the other party relies on that waiver to their detriment.
Then the first party might be estopped, prevented from later trying to enforce the condition they waived.
Exactly. Reliance makes the waiver stick, essentially. It protects the party who relied.
Wow, okay. That ties a lot together. modifications, underlying principles. Quite a journey through Angela's notes.
It covers a lot of ground, from the UCC's flexibility on consideration for modifications
to common law's stricter approach with its specific exceptions.
and those foundational rules: assent, consideration, good faith, PER, promissory estoppel, accord and satisfaction, waiver, all crucial.
So, Angela, hopefully this deep dive, guided by your own outlines, has clarified these modification rules and related concepts for your bar prep.
Remember those key distinctions. UCC versus common law on consideration is huge. And watch for those en clauses and the impact of conduct.
Yeah, and maybe think about this as you continue studying. How does that no oral modification clause really play out when parties have, say, a 5-year relationship and always just change things verbally?
Good question. What's the interplay between the clause, waiver by conduct, and maybe even course of performance evidence?
And what are the real-world teeth of that good faith requirement during modification talks, especially if one side clearly has more bargaining power? How do you prove bad faith?
Excellent points to ponder. It's not just knowing the rules, but how they apply in messy, real-world scenarios.
Exactly. Well, Angela, thanks for letting us explore this with you using your materials.
We hope this was genuinely helpful for your studies. Keep digging into those notes.
Absolutely. Keep those questions sharp, and seriously, best of luck on the bar exam.
Hey everyone, I am back. This is Angela, your real live living and breathing host who's not AI. Anyhow, yeah, I think that podcast within a podcast went pretty well. I think Claude and Maud did a decent job with my notes. So the next topic that we will be going over in the next podcast is going to be UCC and the common law and the differences in contract formation, contract modification, like all these differences between UCC and the common law. Now, when I came back from the UK to go to law school in the US, I felt like this is one of the things that was really sort of difficult. Like getting my head around, like there are two systems that are serving like the same thing. Because in the UK, we totally don't have the UCC, but there are laws, like specific laws and statutes that have to deal with the sale of goods. So I found it really difficult, like having to deal with the two systems. And I feel all right about it now. And actually I feel better about the UCC now than I did when I first came back over here. But yeah, it was really sort of rough to wrangle with. Anyhow, so closing down this podcast on contract modification, I just wanted to say a few things. AI isn't always correct. I feel like everything in this podcast was pretty much on the spot. But if you feel that there's something that I missed or something that Claude and Maud got totally wrong, email me. My email address is podcast@studyforthebarinyourcar.com. If you'd like to hire me as a law clerk. So I work as a law clerk. I do motions, writs, answers, complaints, briefs, etc. This, that, even letters to third parties, demand letters, etc. And if you're an attorney or you work for an attorney or you know an attorney who needs help, have them contact me. My email address is hello@legalwriterandlawclerk.com. Anyhow, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next podcast.